Welcome to another exciting episode of Working in Tech. Uh, Today is going to be super exciting because Frederick is here to tell us about how he made his transition to tech from pharmacy. And I'm going to hand the mic over to him in a second. But before I do that, I'm just going to give a little bit of an intro. So he is a boot camp grad. He studied pharmacy at the University of Houston. I think, shortly after that, he made this decision to move into tech. Went to a boot camp, then moved to Silicon Valley to land his first role. I think now he's probably been in the industry for about 7 years. He's also interested in the African tech ecosystem, but I'm gonna hang in there for now and let him also kind of like give a little bit of insight into who he is and his career so far.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, you pretty much said all the right things. Frederick Ohen, University of Houston grad. I'm currently a senior software engineer, and specifically, not mobilizing, specializing in iOS. Been doing that for about 7 years. Currently located in Dallas, Texas. Relocated back in 2020, during the pandemic and everything. And yeah, I mean, I'm just still loving the tech industry. I could never do anything else.
That's dope. So, kind of like jumping straight into the deep end. I think there's a question that I typically want to know. I guess a lot of people also want to know is why did you decide to pursue a career in tech?
So, like you mentioned earlier, my undergraduate degree was in biology with the intentions of going to pharmacy school, but it wasn't until maybe 4 days before graduation I decided not to pursue pharmacy anymore because at that time I actually interned at a pharmacy in a hospital and I hated it. It was extremely boring. It was the bane of my existence. And at that time I had to finally conjure up the confidence to tell mommy, I know you spent thousands of dollars for me to go to this school to do pharmacy, but no, I don't want to do it. And then she's like, okay. I'm like, wait, that's it. Okay. That's all that's because I would have been changed my major from way back then. Right. So after graduation, had to start from scratch. And since I didn't really know what to do with my degree at the time, I ended up getting a job at Papados where I served as a waiter. And yeah, I just needed to do that just to pay the bills. And it wasn't until I came across a Business Insider that said 43 courses to change the course of your career. So I was like, okay, cool. I don't have a career at this time. I'm just a server, at Papados serving seafood. So I was like, sure, why not? And as I was going through the list of courses, I came across Introduction to Computer Science by Harvard CS50 class. So I was like, all right, cool. I've always been a nerd. I've been loving video games. So I was like, all right, let me see what this computer science thing is about. And bro, I took the first maybe couple of classes and I absolutely fell in love with it. I felt like my mind, like I feel like a veil just ripped from my eyes. Like, what is this industry? Like, it's finally cool seeing what's actually happening behind the computer and how to make things work. And from there, skyrocket to my career to software engineering. But I can get more into details as we go in the conversation. But that's just like the first. That's like the step one in the journey.
I have so many follow-ups. First of all, first of all, how cool is your mom, right?
Yeah, no. Don't let this story get it twisted. She's still a crazy nice young mom now. Yeah, but just she's like, okay, Rick, I mean, it's your life. You can do what you want to do. I'm like, but mom, the only reason why I even went to this school was because I had a pharmacy school. I thought I was gonna do like, the African thing, like get a
Yeah.
good job, go to this school, get a good job, and then do your thing. But like I said, I just hadn't been exposed to it at the time. I feel like my
So
only exposure to code was when I didn't even know about it was like during the MySpace days when everybody was writing HTML and CSS for their own pages. But we didn't know what we were doing. At that point, we were just making our MySpace page cool. We didn't know that we could actually make very significant amount of money doing it.
yeah, that's interesting. So I something I really wanted to tease out there was that I think at the point that you decided that you wanted to not do pharmacy anymore, you didn't necessarily have it clearly figured out that you wanted to go into software.
Not at all.
So aside from that kind of like Business Insider article, were there other things that you also saw that kind of like, because again, there's like the fact that you kind of like got drawn into it, but
Mm-hmm.
did you see the career potential kind of like from the outside looking in?
No, I didn't see. There was only one girl who she mentioned that she was like an MIS major. So I knew she did stuff with the computers, but it didn't really click in my mind that, oh, I could actually pursue this as a career. So it wasn't until I literally started taking those courses, then started doing a lot of Googling, listening to podcasts, YouTube videos, like, oh, like Code Academy. That's like a very introduction to computer science, introduction to code website. Podcast, there's a Code Newbie podcast where she talks about her background going into tech. And there's and a whole bunch of YouTubers that are just talking about their industry, their interest in the industry. So I had to learn from like the internet. The internet was like my second teacher, and I really took advantage of that because it's free at that point.
So what were, aside from like the Avid CS courses, what other resources did you kind of like use in your learning journey?
What other users?
And I think
Code
you had also
Academy.
mentioned like going to a boot camp.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
look it up.
after my stint as a waiter at Papados, I ended up getting a job at AT&T. And during my job at AT&T, I was known as the Apple guy because I love Apple as a product. So every time a customer with Android would come in, I'd be like, nah, you need to get this iPhone because of XYZ features and XYZ things you can do with it. So I ended up becoming, they call it the Apple Master or the Apple Guru. So pretty much anytime anybody came with the problem when it comes to like Apple products, they came to me. And then something clicked as I'd be helping customers with their Apple products. I'm like, I wonder if I could make an app. How would I go about doing that? Because at the time I was just writing code for the sake of writing code. But if you know anything in this industry, you need to kind of like specialize in one area. And then if you want to become a general master, then you could do that. But to get like a front end job or back end job or mobile job, you need to actually hone it in on one domain. So at that point, I Googled, okay, how do you make iOS apps? And then I learned, okay, you have to learn this Swift as a programming language. You need to download Xcode, that's the IDE. So I went down this other rabbit hole where there's this one other YouTuber, his name is Code with Chris. So he was talking about his journey and like kind of like the introduction to iOS to programming and all those type of things. And then it wasn't until maybe 6 months into the job, I was like, okay, I really want to take the leap. I can't really work full time and be learning at the time because at that point my schedule was like 7 to 7. So by the time I get off of work, I'm like up until maybe 4 a.m. just learning, man, like really just grinding out. So I really took the chance, my faith in God. I was like, all right, you know, I'm gonna quit, go full time, attend this boot camp called the Iron Yard in Houston, Texas, and we did that for 3 months. And that's what my start as far that's like my most formal training when it came to software engineering was at the boot camp.
Okay. So how did you navigate the job application process? Because I know that's something that's daunting for a lot of people.
What do you mean by navigating?
So like how did you
I might
get
as well just
so
I might as well just bang my head against the wall. That was the way I was navigating, man. It was rough, man. Especially being a junior engineer, like trying to break into the industry. Because at that point, I was living in Houston, Texas, so there were jobs there, but they were looking for senior talent. But obviously, I don't have that experience, so I was just applying for jobs all over the country, talking about Pittsburgh, New York, California, Florida, anything that had, you know, iOS developer in it, I was applying for it. I'm pretty sure I applied for maybe more than no lie, more than 300 jobs.
wow.
Zero response.
Wow.
Zero. So yeah, that was very rough. But it wasn't until I actually started to get into the community online via Slack groups where, you know, with hanging out with other techies to where they would actually give me introductions to, oh, you're doing XYZ, let me introduce you to so and so they can give you some insight. It wasn't until I actually started talking with people and getting internal referrals where I was starting to get any type of leverage. Like, okay, I might have not have got the job, but I got a call with the recruiter. So no, and now I know what to say. And like, kind of like, you know, I'm still taking incremental steps towards success.
And that's a very key element that you
Hmm.
unlock there because like it's never like 0 to 100. I don't think it works that
Never,
way. So
never.
how important are those incremental steps?
I feel like, you know, that saying, there's no such thing as an overnight success. That is like, that should be tattooed on everybody's forehead if you're trying to break into anything because, you know, LeBron isn't as great because he just did it overnight. And name any XYZ person that you just hold to any high regard. You have to take those baby steps, put in the hard work that nobody sees. Everybody look at me like, oh yeah, you're a big guy. You got the house, the wife. You live in Silicon Valley. You did it all. But I'm like, no, you didn't. You wasn't seeing when I was legit waiting tables, coming home smelling like shrimp, and then getting right back on my computer trying to learn how to what is a for loop. That like that, I was in the gutter for real. Like that's how small steps got to where I am now. So yeah, just don't you can't cheat the process. There's no such thing as cheating the process.
So, what was your experience like during job interviews? So, when you started to kind of like get in front of hiring
Mhm.
managers and stuff, what was that experience, and how did you prepare for them?
I prepared for them the best that I could. I bombed a lot. I bombed a lot of interviews, but even in my bombing, fortunately enough, those companies were still kind enough to give me some type of feedback. I'm talking bombing like to the point where they'd give me a problem, and I would just sit there in silence, and we'd just be looking at each other like, I don't know. I'm like, it's like I can already tell like, oh man, like this guy, he's like he has no idea. I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know, I don't know. But I feel like one of my very best introductions to interviewing was when I applied for Reach, and it's LinkedIn's apprenticeship program that focuses on people who don't have conventional backgrounds. So if you didn't major in computer science and you just got into tech, that's the program for you. I wrote a paper, told them my story. Apparently, they loved it, so I was able to fly out to Sunnyvale, and where I interviewed with maybe 4 engineers. They gave me a take-home project was to build Hangman, so I had to build the UI, the logic, XYZ. And during the interview, as they were asking me to build more features, I I stumbled because at that time I was still pretty much a rookie, but I was trying to like still grind it out as much as I can, and I didn't get selected for the apprenticeship program, but some of those engineers were able to still kind of like, hey, keep your head up. We added each other on LinkedIn. They still follow my career growth, and they were able to give me some advice after. So if you do happen to bomb the interview, that's fine. It's perfectly normal. I don't think I've met an engineer that hasn't bombed an interview, but I think a key thing would to be still keep in contact with people who did interview, so they can like, hey, I know I didn't get the job, but what could I do differently? Assuming that like you're not breaking any NDA laws, which I don't think you are. But yeah, just kind of like just make relationships with anybody that you see in the industry because you never know what they could do for your career later.
So, essentially, it's all about progression and like keeping the maintaining those relationships.
Absolutely.
So, what challenges did you face early in your career, right? And how did you overcome them? And I'm talking
I
like,
think
so
the
let's say after you got your first job, after you scaled that hurdle of the interview, like
Mhm.
what were those challenges? Because I don't assume it's smooth sailing.
Oh yeah, yeah, not at all. I feel like make just actually I didn't realize how long it really takes to learn a code to maybe year and a half in my job where I was like, oh, obviously I was still like my assignments done and shipping features, but you know, I would say honestly, the first 6 months, I was fortunate enough to have a team where they already knew coming in that I was extremely junior. I was contract to hire, like, hey, look, this guy's extremely junior. They saw my projects on GitHub, so they know like the code quality that I'd be coming in with. They know that I need some extra help, some extra mentoring. So they decided to like, all right, cool. I'd be able to work there in the SF office for about 3 months, contract to hire. If I don't do well, at least that I had those 3 months to kind of like get me off my feet and to go somewhere else. And if I do well, if I do kind of like blow them out the water, they're like, all right, yeah, let me go ahead and hire this guy and see that he's actually a good fit. And fortunately enough, I was a good fit. I was hired on full time, and I was working there for about at Script for about maybe about 3 years.
I just realized I was muted.
Yeah.
So, and how was your growth? How was your progression in that role? Like, when did you feel like you could take on more responsibility? When did you feel like talk about like that 1.5
Mhm.
year mark when you started to feel a bit more
Yeah, I think around that 1.5 year mark where I'd already known the process of us, getting features or getting like product requirements, getting more familiar with the code base, and okay, if I know that if I'm going to need some extra help, I'm gonna communicate early and communicate often, because what you don't want to do is feel like, oh, I don't want them to think that I'm incompetent, so I'm just gonna like stay by myself and code in a silo, but you get stuck on a problem that probably takes you, I don't know, 4 hours, but could have took another senior engineer maybe 5 minutes or an hour to fix because, obviously they know the code base and they've been doing the job longer that you have. So don't try to be like Superman or Superwoman and be like, oh, I can do these things all by myself, because you can't. Like, if your team is there to help you, by all means ask for help. So I think that's another key thing I think most people don't know in the industry. Like, you should definitely ask for help. And if you're on a really good team, there should be open to helping you, because if you succeed, then we succeed, because everybody wants to see the company go in the same direction. Especially if you're like invested in, stock options, RSUs. I'm like, hey, whatever we can do to kind of get this rocket ship going and on the same path, let's get it done, type thing.
That makes sense. So, what do you consider the most rewarding part of your job?
The most rewarding part of my job. Well, I would say the fact that I'm learning something every day. There's no, and technology is always changing. There's never, I like what I knew or what I learned maybe back in 2016 is irrelevant today, because the technology moves like every year, especially being an iOS developer. I feel like it's even faster if you work on the web, but iOS specifically, WWDC happens once a year. Apple, hey, look at all these brand new APIs. All right, iOS 17, iOS 18. It's like you always got to kind of keep up all these new things now, all these new different products. You got to kind of keep to all these different platforms that they're always trying to build out. So you got to like just really stay on your toes. And if you really want to be engaged and never want to be bored, then I can wholeheartedly say that I recommend being in the tech industry, because you won't be bored and you will have to constantly be learning.
That's dope. Um, so how important, you touched on something important in WWDC, right?
Mhm.
How important is it for you as a developer, maybe a iOS developer, but a developer in general, to kind of like stay on top of industry
Yeah.
trends?
Oh, extremely, because that's, you can see where the industry is going, or you can see where your domain is going. For example, with Swift UI, which is another UI language that Apple's building, or that's how Apple's built. It's kind of like, all right, now they're trying to like really push UI faster UI development, so they can kind of like make more, just make a developer's lives easier, because one of the complaints that iOS developers have is that it's just so hard building UI, because it's just, whether it's using storyboards and you can't do that with multiple teams, or if you're programming in code, it's like you're writing so much boilerplate code that, by the time you get to the business logic, it's like you already spent maybe just a week just building a screen, which could have been knocked out in an hour or a couple hours using Swift UI. So I think they're trying to just make a developer's lives a lot easier and push towards that.
That's dope. And almost like on that same tooling question, I'm gonna ask like a very cliche question. So,
Mm.
how do you see AI shaping the space that you're in right now?
AI. Well, I don't see it shaping. It's shaping as we speak, because I use it every day. There's like an internal tool that we use to that's pretty much backed by ChatGPT 4 that we can just use for like day to day. So I'd say get on board, use it. How do I see it shaping? And whether it's even making a clearer commit messages, you can make your documentation, your code comments more clear, your PR comments clear. Heck, if you need to write a product design requirement um, thing, you could use that. Even emails, I don't really write a lot of emails, but if I do, I'm like, okay, make this sound more professional. I'm trying to say XYZ, but I'm like, I don't write a lot of emails. I'm like, so let me just go ahead and let ChatGPT do it. So it's like, it's just kind of like incremental, just incremental steps that makes you more productive.
That it's really good that you give like those really specific
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and everyday examples.
yeah.
Um, what can you share like a challenging project you worked on, right? And don't necessarily have to share the details, but
Yeah.
like how, just to kind of like demonstrate problem solving, like how you went about like fixing the issue.
Well, I think one of my hardest projects was when I had to build this notebook feature for Scribd, and I had no idea how to do it. And we also were using this new API parser that we call it. Well, I'm not gonna say what we call it. We pretty much use this new API parser that I had no idea how to use. So I pretty much had to work hand in hand with the senior engineer. He taught me a lot. But the thing I didn't do, I didn't communicate when I needed help, and I didn't communicate when things were gonna be behind timeline. Especially at a startup, it's like, oh, time is like key. They want to be the first to do things. So I was like, okay, guys, hey, we thought that we're using this new tool to consume our APIs. It's not working as well as we thought it was. So it's kind of like a little shaky. So we're gonna need another couple of weeks or so. I didn't do that. It wasn't until we had some C-suite people like, hey, this thing was supposed to be finished in a couple of weeks ago. What's going on? And then I felt bad because I can actually see her downstairs. I'm on the second floor. I'm like, oh, I can actually hear her. And then I hear my manager and her going back and forth. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then he has to tell me like, hey man, what's going on? So pretty much just while they run your team, if you are working with some type of new technology, really make sure that thing is documented well, that you really understand it, and that you know somebody that understands, so you can actually let them know what problems that you're having, so they can help, or you could like find help in Stack Overflow or something, or now use ChatGPT. So ChatGPT could be your new Stack Overflow. Man,
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like I sound like, oh man, but I'm like, man, this new generation, man, they got ChatGPT. All you do is bop bop bop. I'm like, bro, I haven't been on Stack Overflow in like since ChatGPT was announced, bro. It makes no sense. I mean, man, if I had ChatGPT back then, what? I would have got a
It's
job in a week.
it's so interesting, like how AI. I feel like the biggest thing that I've seen it do is that it shortens the path to the answer or the reward, right? Like
Yeah.
I could even imagine something as simple as like fine tuning your resume. Sometimes, like this thing you want to say in your head, but you can't
Mhm.
really articulate it.
Yeah.
So now you go to monster.com and pull this little quote and put like, so just tweaking a resume, which if you're looking for a new job, you should be doing like
Absolutely.
frequently,
One,
right? Will
it's the great
take.
equalizer. It's the great
Will,
equalizer. You can like copy and paste. Here are the job requirements. Here's my resume. Tailor my resume to match these requirements. Bam, that's it.
Now you
Obviously,
have
you
a
double.
brand new,
You have a
got a
brand new
brand new
resume.
resume.
Exactly. It's
Before
good.
you had to do that manually. It's so
So I
interesting.
wonder I wonder how recruiters and hiring managers are like trying to combat that. It's like, did this person just use ChatGPT? But I'm like, that's still conventional wisdom. Like, you want to tailor your resume to the job that you're applying for. So is it? I mean, like I said, it's a great equalizer. So that's still a
So
conventional.
I feel like the sad part of that is that it actually makes it more challenging in the sense that, again, I've heard chatter about people in recruiting say stuff like they also use like AI,
Mm,
like catchers to
yeah,
where like even if you just wrote it really well and it's not AI, but it senses like it's AI, you're
yeah,
gonna get dinged for that, right?
yeah.
Because, and it's interesting because I made a video earlier in the year talking about like the ATS is a robot, ChatGPT is a robot. So why don't you let the robots kind of like battle it out? Why don't you let them battle it out?
Yeah.
But I guess it's gonna be really interesting, right?
Hmm.
Especially with like keyword stuffing and things like that.
There you go.
But to like another really interesting part, how has your income grown from before you got into tech to now?
Bro, it's not even a competition. I told you I was a server. So probably making max. I was only there for 3 months. Um, I don't even want to say like a salary for my server because I feel like I didn't really work there long enough. But for AT&T, I definitely was around maybe 55 to 60 because I was also making a commission as well. So, but month to month, but I think for a yearly average, I was making like maybe 55 to 60 working in a retail store. Now 6 figures, and it's like
Easy.
easy.
It's like- that's really dope. And what's the average across like the career? So for maybe iOS engineers and like software engineers in general, like
Mhm.
from when you're early career, like how much can you expect to make when you're kind of like mid career, and like what do you see like those top dogs really making?
Yeah, so I feel like maybe it also depends on location. So if you're in the Texas area, I'm gonna speak for Texas. I've seen 105 to 130, that range. Silicon Valley, you're looking at maybe, depending on, this all depends on experience as well, and also like stock and RSUs and everything. I would say maybe 125 to 160.
for entry level?
And oh, entry level, I would say entry level. So when I was entry level, I was making 105. So I'm maybe around like 105 to 120 around that time. Maybe also, like I said, depends on the company how well they're doing. If it's big tech, Apple, Google, Facebook, it's even more. I think interns are making like maybe 125, something crazy like that. So
Wow.
maybe yeah. So yeah,
And then like so as you're kind of like advanced like mid career, like how
yeah,
much can you do?
yeah. I think mid career 150 to 180. Top dogs 200 plus. I feel like if you're at 200, you're like a senior top dog, and then there you go.
That's dope. Um, and what are some of the things kind of like you mentioned factor? Like what are some of the things that kind of like go into that compensation conversation?
I think you just really have to just demonstrate being competent that you can actually do the job. So if you don't have a lot of job experience, meaning like, all right, I've never had a job employed in tech. However, I built this really cool dashboard that does XYZ, and I can see how this dashboard can influence your company. Then you have a little more leverage. Like, okay, this guy actually did his research. I don't have to know whether or not he can code. I'm seeing his project right here, and he's telling me in detail that he can do XYZ. So that might kind of give you a leg up. But if you really want to see, this might be a controversial opinion, but if you really want to see that gain in compensation, you might have to move to maybe either New York, Silicon Valley, or Seattle area just to kind of like get do this six-figure thing. If you can, I know not everybody's able. I'm still a big fan of being in the city with the whole brain trust, where you're just surrounded by extremely smart people and you can actually kind of network with them. So yeah, that's where I saw my biggest increase, because I went from 60, let's say 55K. 55K at AT&T. Started off, my first job was 105 in Silicon Valley. So that's still low, but I was also at that time I was rooming with a friend of mine who let me crash on his couch. So my rent was like super cheap. So I was able to kind of like pocket all that money until my wife came and we moved together, and that's when we that's when we have to get a one-bedroom apartment. That's when my income just like, okay, 105 feels like nothing now because it's so expensive out there.
That's interesting. So, did you really touch on something important that, I kind of like I've had those conversations in the past, but tell me if you think it makes sense, right? I personally feel that, if you're new into tech, you should kind of like be at least open to moving or going to where there's more opportunity. One, because people are going to be more likely to take a chance on you. And
Hmm.
then two, the competition is not going to be as fierce because there's just more supply, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're in a zone where like, people tend to be more choosy and like have way more requirements when you're like in a, low supply of jobs market,
Hmm.
then not. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I did it. Meaning, like, I could not get a job in Houston because I was a junior. Okay, where can I get a job where I know jobs are plentiful, and then they might take a chance on a junior guy? Let's go to the mothership. Let's go to where all the takers are at, Silicon Valley, man. Let's
Yeah.
go. So, but I don't know if the energy's still the same post COVID. I mean, if I was still starting off, I would still go, but highly recommend it if anybody can. If not, go to your local. Whether if you're in Texas, maybe shoot for Austin. If you're in Florida, Miami. If you're in the Northeast, obviously New York, Seattle, and the Bay Area, if you can.
So, in terms of, because I imagine that a lot of people in tech do this. How do you, because of course you have to keep learning, right? So how do you decide what skills, so let's say you kind of like just got in, how do you decide what skills or technologies that can help you maybe just get to that next level, right? Because we talk about progression, right? So how do you think about progression for, as somebody who was new in tech kind of like those many years ago?
So it depends on if you're employed or if you're not employed. So let me go from the employment standpoint. If you're employed and you feel like this certain technology can help you do your job better, then by all means pursue that specific skill. Or if you're employed and you just want to like do something on the side, like, hey, what is this AI thing going on? What is generative AI, LLMs? Let me see if I can do this on the side. So if you want to make yourself more marketable in that way, you could do that. But if you're still looking for a job, I'd say, hey, what is being asked of you in the marketplace right now? So let's say if you're a developer or iOS developer, for example, you see that everybody still wants to get developers that are using UI Kit. Okay, make sure to use UI Kit. Don't just jump on Swift UI because that's just the shiniest thing that you see, because Swift UI still is not being used in production, to my knowledge, in a lot of apps. It still looks like it's a lot of it's UI Kit world. So yeah, I think it depends on what your goals are and your current employment status. Because if you're currently employed, I feel like you have a lot more leverage to kind of like, oh, what do I want to do? But if you're not employed and you're still looking for a job, what's currently on the market? Like, what's valuable? How can I make myself useful to a potential employer?
That's really dope. Um, in terms of advice, what advice would you give to someone who's aspiring to transition from into tech from a non-technical background?
Figure out what track you want to do, whether it's cybersecurity, cloud computing, mobile development, front end development, back end development. Because anybody can say, "I want to break into tech," but it's like, what part of tech? Like, so try out these different things. So if you're more of a person that's more into in design and how things look, okay, maybe you want to be on the front end type of things. Or if you just kind of care about how things work behind the scenes and like the heavy business logic, then by all means go into back end development. Um, two, so one, sp- know what domain you want to get into. Two, if you can, another controversial opinion, move to one of those cluster cities to where the tech jobs are plentiful. You probably have a better job versus getting a remote, because as you can see, the remote wave is kind of dying off, and I can't see a lot of employers hiring remote employees, especially juniors. And three, just kind of just trust the process. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna suck for a long time, but eventually, with persistence, you'll get it, and keep
So,
getting.
so are you team boot camp or self-taught? Which do you, is there a better way or
No, I wouldn't say a better way. I would say depends on your financial situation, because I don't want to tell someone to go to a boot camp and then the boot camp doesn't deliver on what they promise. Because I've seen a lot of boot camps that are like, "Hey, come here and then we guarantee you get a job and as soon as you graduate," which is like just not true. Because I've seen a lot of my people that went to my boot camp. It took us maybe 6 months plus 6 to 12 months after the boot camp before we actually got our first role. So I would say utilize as many free resources as you can. YouTube, Discord, communities with your specific interests, whether it's back end development, front end development, mobile development, cybersecurity, group me's, just network as much as you can possible. If you can't, go to these cluster cities. And yeah, I think that's what I would say about that.
so? I think you touched on something really interesting that I liked. So, how does someone find the right communities for them to be in? Because oftentimes the people trying to break into tech don't even have that clear view. So, are
Yeah.
there resources you can actually use to find specific communities that can help you out?
Yeah. Think Twitter, so you can look at hashtag like HTML or something and see if there's any groups. Facebook groups. You can actually Google like JavaScript meetups in my area or iOS development meetups in my area, and then kind of go from there. And then like, okay, you meet with other developers. Like, okay, hey, what groups are you a part of that I should be a part of, even though I'm brand new? And one thing I've noticed in the tech industry, that people are pretty friendly and will tell you, we're not going to gatekeep. We're going to tell you what we did to get to where we are, because people did that for me. I'm like, hey man, I don't know what I'm doing. I barely know what a view controller is. So how do I do what you did? Like, all right, yeah, man, cool. Let's just keep coming to these meetups, learn XYZ things. And, you know, to this day, like we're still on LinkedIn. So like every time I have like some type of career update, he'll like it, be like, yeah, man, I can't believe I remember when you were back in the Galleria and you were asking me XYZ, and that was so cool to see you doing these big things. So yeah, is Meetup still a thing? I'm not sure if Meetup is still like a website,
It
but yeah,
is.
yeah, it is. Yeah, so yeah, Meetup. So once you find your specific domain of interest, cybersecurity, mobile development, backend development, front end development, Google it, see what the meetups are in your area, network with people, talk to people, and then find out who else they're connected to.
Nice, nice. Um, we're about to wrap up this segment. So typically we would do like about 40 minutes of just kind of like quick fire round, and then we'll leave about 20 minutes for a question. Um, so given like the fact that you're working in a high, I probably say high stress environment, right? Which tech can be sometimes.
Mhm.
How do you maintain work life balance?
Well, I really don't even like the term work-life balance because I mean it's just life. It's just like how do you balance anything? But I would say that um, hmm, so depending on what your situation is, let's say if you're married, obviously you got to set expectation with your spouse. Like, all right, babe, I love you, but this project is kind of crazy right now. So this week I'll be a little strapped, but when I get some free time, I'm all yours. So that's one way to kind of like manage it. Get a hobby, whether it's golf, playing basketball, video games. You just need to kind of get away from the computer sometimes because I can't tell you how many times I've been like, I have no idea what this bug. I don't know how to solve this problem. Let me get away, close the laptop, go take a walk, and as I'm walking or if I'm taking a shower, I'm like, oh, I think I have a solution. So you kind of need to get away a little bit. So to kind of help you be more productive. But yeah, I would say just either kind of communicate with the community, whoever that is, friends, church, spouses. Let them know what's going on. Take a break. Also, have that expectation set with your manager as far as like how long you need to be online or kind of how things should be. I feel like you should probably peep the vibe of that type of work environment before you even get hired because I think there's you can either look at you can look at Glassdoor, Reddit, and yeah, Glassdoor, Reddit, and some even the recruiter will kind of tell you. Well, you can ask the recruiter like, "Hey, what's the work-life balance of the work environment at this type of company?" Also, Twitter
Nice.
too, because Twitter employees are they're very vocal.
So how would you if you could pick one lesson that you learned in your tech journey, was there one thing that really stands out for you?
Communicate early and communicate often because I've seen the most senior engineers not deliver on a project on a timeline or deliver in a timely manner, but they let all project stakeholders know. What you don't want is to have people caught off guard. Like, but I just told my client that this is supposed to be done in 2 months. Now it's going to tell me it's taking me 3 months. That's how does that work? So communicate early and communicate often, please, 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 please. I'm begging you.
Okay, I'm gonna ask one more and then we can throw it open. So if you have any question, please ask them in the chat. I'll be looking forward to them.
Hmm.
Um, so what's the oh, I think we already got one, so I'm gonna just throw it in there. So how does one potentially land internships in tech?
How does one land internships in tech? So it seems like nowadays it's harder to land internships only because everybody seems like to be on a hiring freeze, but they're not really on hiring freeze. So figure out what company you want to work for, who's hiring, and instead of just blindly applying online to that job, talk to the person who either works there or is actually getting or the hiring manager because you're more likely to have a resume seen if somebody else gives you a referral versus just blindly applying on LinkedIn, no matter what ChatGPT gives you for the resume. I feel like you still need that human element. Like, oh, I talked to this person. They're not a weirdo. Seem pretty cool. Let's give them a shot, especially if they're hiring for interns. So, but yeah, I also say like those communities, like kind of stay online if you especially can't be in those cluster cities, Reddit, Discord groups, Facebook groups. Bro, I'm telling you, there's so many. Just type in your domain, tech group, and on Google and just find something. I'm sure you can. If you can't, you can let me know on LinkedIn. I don't mind helping people find them as
Okay, so yeah, connect with him on LinkedIn and then,
well.
and then ask
Yeah.
ask to find help him to
Yeah,
find
yeah,
that
because
community.
I know how it's like very intimidating, especially like if you never done it before. I'm like, who am I? Like somebody like, what if I was like I don't know, a nurse and this is my first time? What do I know about technology? Or I'm a I'm a mechanical engineer. Like, what do I know about, computers, something like that. Like, so they won't even know where to start. I don't mind like giving them a decent direction.
Okay, nice. So, I think on that same topic as well, what are some of the um, unconventional job strategies that you've seen people use in the industry? Because again, like you rightly said, like I think one of the creativity is super important, right?
Yeah,
When you're brand new, because like oftentimes companies are not willing, which is sad to say, but companies are not willing to make that investment with their code
yeah,
base or opportunities. But it's like if you fight, right, and you show like that initiative, you get that
yeah,
opportunity. So what are some of the instances where you've seen like people kind of like go hearted, like you're like, wow, why didn't
yeah,
I think of that?
yeah. I'll use one example for myself. It was when I was interviewing, or actually, I flew out for a job fair in San Francisco. This is before I had a job, and I was waiting on the Caltrain. I think I was I forgot where I was, but I was waiting on the Caltrain. I took my phone out. I was like, "Hey, look, guys, I'm in Silicon Valley. My background is XYZ. I have no idea what I'm doing. I really love tech. I really feel like this is what God's calling me to do. So I feel like I need the job. So I'm out here. So if anybody has any referrals, by all means, please let me know." And the comments, like, "Oh, bro, I love what you're doing. You inspire me. Hey, let's talk. I can get you an interview at so and so. I can get you an interview at so and so." But the fact that I
Wow.
actually put myself out there, and I was like, somebody put a face to the name. I was like, you know what? I want to see this guy succeed because he was so vulnerable for what he needed. I'm gonna see what I can do. Like, I can only get you there. I can't promise you the job, but I can at least promise you an interview. So from there, I was able to get interviews from uh, Yahoo, Square, and Facebook. And like I said, like, bro, at that time when I was a rookie, I was like, who do I think I am? Oh God, Facebook, bro. I'm in the HQ with the good snacks, bro. They got Gatorade, like not Powerade, bro. Like Gatorade, fruit snacks, the top tier. What? No, Menlo Park, bro. I saw Mark Zuckerberg in the meeting, like his office was right there. So I was like, man, I didn't know. What? No, but like I said, just be creative the best way you can. Put yourself out there on LinkedIn. Be vulnerable. People love seeing that story. Everybody wants to see people succeed. Like, why? If I saw something like that, I'm like, you know what? How can I help? How can I help?
What did that Facebook experience do to you? Like, was that when you said, "I don't care what it takes, I'm gonna like do
Yeah,
this"?
it's just kind of like very reassuring. Oh, full disclosure, I bombed 3 of those interviews, so I still. But it's like it's the fact that I got them. I was like, wow, like even though I didn't get the job, but I'm like, I'm still like, I'm in the mix. Like I am in Facebook's headquarters. I'm in Square's headquarters. I'm at Yahoo. It's still insane. So just being able to see that, I was like, nah, bro. I don't care how many times I have to go through this interview. I'm still gonna get it because for the most part, if I'm not mistaken, most of these companies you can reapply for again in like 6 months anyway. So it's not a no. It's just to try again later.
Yeah,
And for the most part, they're still gonna have your information on file. So they might follow up and like, hey, we saw that you applied in XYZ. Do you want to re-interview? So and at least
yeah.
this time you'll be better prepared because you bombed it so bad. That's like, okay, now I know how to do better next time, or now I have longer to study.
And it's interesting because it's something that I've also seen in my personal journey, and I don't know what extent is true for you. Is that even making those mistakes in your journey is a big part of the journey because I've not learned a lesson, for example, as hard like when I make that mistake myself. For example, like somebody asks you, oh, even something as simple as, oh, did you take a look at the website and see this thing? Now you're almost traumatized by messing that up. That every single interview you go to, you want to take a look and like, hold
Yeah.
on.
Bro, that's how I remember that communicate early, communicate often thing because I remember my C-suite executive saying, "What is this?" I was like, oh my, I was like, God, I cannot have this happen ever again, ever again. So that's why I'm always like, what? If anything, my team will tell me like, oh yeah, I'm always. They always know what's going on with my projects. They know like whether I'm blocked, what I'm not blocked. If I do need some help, like, oh yeah, it's very visible on the Slack where every project stakeholder is available. Like I'm like at here, hey, I need this. This isn't working. So how can we get that done? And if like, I'm like, hey, so don't say I didn't tell you because I did. I added channel at here at channel as in at here who's online at channel everybody's notified. So communicate early, communicate often. That's my traumatizing uh, experience as well.
And something that I think kind of like is glossed over. I know we can't even touch on everything, but what are some of the things that are norms in the industry that is shocking for someone who's coming new to
Ooh.
the industry, right? That you almost have to learn, like, and even you succeeding, that's a very big part of it.
Mhm. So here's one of my things that I think I really appreciate about our industry. If somebody doesn't know something, they usually say, "I don't know," and you're like, "Wait, you don't know?" But you've been an engineer for almost like 20 years. Like, yeah, I still don't. I've never seen this problem before. I don't know, but here are the steps I'm going to take to figure out the problem. So one, doesn't matter how long you've been in this industry, nobody knows everything. It's impossible, and it's okay to say I don't know, versus you trying to like filibuster away like, oh yeah, this is you just need to do X Y Z, and then somebody does X Y Z, and they're like, wait a minute, you just told me that this was the solution to the problem. Now it's not working. Why didn't you just tell me if you didn't know? There's no shame in not knowing because nobody knows everything.
Mm. I think one of my biggest lessons in my latest role was understanding the fact that I didn't have to come with all the answers. I thought I had to, right? So it's like you kind of like are faced with this problem. Somebody says go solve it. I almost forgot like my entire team is a resource, and like
Yeah.
just call that meeting, right? Come with a bunch of interesting questions, and like you can solve the problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? Right there, like because people have ideas too. People have thoughts, and
Mm-hmm.
even sometimes there was something that happened to me one time that really blew my mind. So one of the functional people on my team, we have a lot of data analysts, and we were having this chat about how do I solve this problem. And in talking through the problem, I took it one step further and started talking about the solution. I'm like, oh, never mind.
Yeah.
And
the,
then
the rubber the rubber
the
duck
rubber
theory.
duck,
Hey, I'm
exactly.
trying to do this. I tried this. I tried this. I tried that. I'm like, okay. Sorry guys, false alarm.
So I think that was definitely something that was super interesting to me to
Yeah, man.
see, like the possibility of that. Um, one, if we flip the switch around, right around kind of like newbies making it in tech, what are some of the things that you think tech companies can do to make that journey easier?
Be open to applicants that have unconventional backgrounds. So I'll use LinkedIn for an example. The fact that they have their Reach program to where, hey, we're looking for people who don't necessarily have a computer science degree from Stanford. We want to see, hey, if you just love technology, you can build something, we'll take a chance on you. So they actually have an entire program for mentorship along the way so people can be groomed into really dope software engineers. And from what I've seen on LinkedIn, from like the people that I follow, it's a pretty successful program. I've seen people that started off at Reach as an apprentice and now they're they're senior engineers at other places. I'm like, wow, see, all it takes is somebody just kind of like just all it takes is a chance on somebody, because I feel like you could look at it like this. For example, you could have like somebody who has like a rich spoiled kid who doesn't really take anything for granted versus somebody who doesn't have a lot and that's willing to kind of grind to get it. You're always going to want that grinder, that hustler, especially since this industry is all about hustling, right? So like, wouldn't you want the person like, oh no, they got it out the mud for real. There's
Yeah,
no
for
plan.
real.
There's no plan B. Like I need to feed my family, so if I need to stay up till 4 a.m., and this is like I said, this might be toxic, but like I'm just giving an example. If I need to stay up till 4 a.m. to solve this problem, guess what I'm gonna do? Versus this guy's like, yeah, I get it. I'll get it tomorrow.
Yeah,
It's fine. I'm good. I got four of the offers somewhere else anyway. No, I want that hustler. I want that grinder that's gonna get the job done.
that's interesting. So
I'm, full
go ahead.
disclosure, I'm not advocating that anybody works until 4 a.m. That's just an exaggerated example.
Okay, so how do and I wanted to actually give a follow up to that because I used to lead a boot camp, and one of the things that I saw, like one of the programs that we partnered with that really blew my mind was this program called ETSA. It's by JP Morgan Chase,
Mhm.
and they had this program, like even the design of it. So they kind of like do it like a hackathon, and you come it's not even for them, it's not really about the solution. They just want to see how you problem solve, how you think. And one of our students actually made it in the program, and she was one of the top performers. And it's interesting to see because I think, those CS questions, those challenges are really important, a way of testing people who've gone through that process. But
Right.
there's a lot of company that's missing out on great talent because they're getting by those same mechanisms. When, like, there's a lot of great talent that can solve problems in a variety of ways, but it's like
Yeah.
you kind of like keep putting them through like the same test. Whereas like there's so many more, and I do understand like conflict dilemma, like, investing in a talent is a significant investment, but I think it could just be a bit more creative about how you go about it. Because I think they're successful. Even the entire model, it's kind of like I think they went one step ahead to even kind of like separate. Because before they used to mix and match it with like talent that they sourced from like colleges, right? But they completely broke it apart and
Yeah.
said, we want to specifically cater to this specific needs that is what we're going to come in with. And they have like a 2 year ramp after, like, if you make it successfully and you kind of like join this 2 year fellowship, and then you become full time. I think you actually become full time. It's just that like you convert from like the fellowship to actually being a full time employee in 2 years, which is really great.
That's
So that's
really
a
good.
model that I really like. But I definitely think more companies should do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, like the contract to hire thing. We can't say that we're at a we have no talent, but like, oh, okay, try to, like, what's wrong with the contract? All right, let's do a 3 month contract. You might find some great picks. Like, oh, this person is actually pretty competent. They do a good job. Let's hire them all. You
Yeah,
know, and especially with like a contract, I feel like it's still beneficial because let's say for me for example, even if I hadn't got the job, I was just grateful just to get a job or just to be in the valley at that point. So I was like, all right, cool. I'm working downtown San Francisco. If I don't get a job, at least, like, okay, I can use this 3 month foundation to get me somewhere else. But by God's grace, I was able to get hired on full time. So contract to hire, I've always been a fan of that role or that model.
so what are the different and and again, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. What are the different interview stages that a typical um, software developer will go through?
Yeah. So it's been a while since I interviewed, like almost 3 years, but I think it hasn't changed over the years from what I've seen. You have your initial recruiting call with the recruiter, where they're pretty much making sure that you're not a weirdo. That's what it is. Like, hey, what do you know about the company? Why are you interested? Blah blah blah. Second, if I'm not mistaken, it should be maybe another call, maybe like a maybe some like leak code type question, or it's like an introduction interview with another engineer on the team. Like, that's gonna be like a 45-minute one. And then the third one is usually a more technical one that's gonna be like all day, which is maybe 3 hours. We're interviewing maybe 3 to 5 people. It could be like building on another leak code problem, building a personal project, and then after that could be something along the lines of system designs, maybe a product question, and then maybe interview with the hiring manager, and then maybe wrapping up after that. So pretty much 3 stages. So you got your interviewing call with the recruiter. Make sure you're not a weirdo. Second, just a small test with another engineer, and then you're on site. And then after your on site interview, you hopefully you get the job. But I think for the most part, that's like the flow.
So if you had to kind of like go back today, working at Papa Do's, and you're trying to make that transition, that transition,
Yeah.
how would you construct that? Like, what would be kind of like the step by step? So I would do this and do this and do that.
Okay.
What would that look like for you?
So for one, I need to actually get in front of the recruiter. So, all right, how do I get into this company? So network, build my community, get the in. After you get with the recruiter should tell you specifically what you should expect from the next interview. So let's say, okay, oh, it's just a 45-minute LECO problem. Awesome. Can I schedule this out maybe 2 or 3 weeks out? Yes, you can. Spend those 3 weeks studying as much as you can for pretty much do leak code out as much as you can. And then after, you get that's your second step. After you get that step, then you're on your on-site, to where they'll give you more specific information about what to expect, whether it's, okay, they're going to give you another leak code problem, another on-site project, or a system designs one, and from there you can pick up cracking the coding interview. I think there's like cracking the design system interview, and then I think after that might be like a culture fit ish uh type interview. So yeah, I think that would be like the ramp. But if you don't have a good community, even if you don't get that call with a recruiter, you still built that community. You can actually talk to people like, okay, hey, what should I expect? And hey, would you even mind giving me a mock interview? Because I'm in the camp of you cannot do this by yourself. I certainly didn't. I've had all the help in the world, so many different people. But if you didn't have that community, then it's borderline impossible.
Yeah. And what are some, in terms of like the education piece, before you even get to the recruiter side or interviewing side, what are some resources that you think are very crucial that can help, maybe someone trying to become an iOS engineer or just an engineer in general?
Yeah, I think cracking the coding interview is still pretty relevant, and I feel like that's like been the industry standard. YouTube, there's so many different. Even Google has like a YouTube channel where they're breaking down a problem and what to expect from like technical interviews. So if you want to use Google as your bar, okay, I think Google's a pretty big company. We can agree that some smart people work at Google, right? So like kind of go from there. All right, I'm starting to see how the flow of that works. Probably see how other big tech companies work because from what I've seen, the big tech companies, for better or for worse, influences what the remainder of the other tech companies do because they want to keep the standard high for technology or for technical interviews or whatever. So yeah, if Google, Microsoft, Apple, and them, and Amazon are doing it, you could probably safely assume that everybody else is going to be doing it as well.
So aside from Free Code Camp, what are the like really solid places that kind of like teach really
Uh,
good stuff?
okay, so
And
free CodeCamp, YouTube. Honestly, now I say ChatGPT. You could, I think I need to spend a day just to kind of like interview with ChatGPT, kind of see how well it does. Because I feel like it also has a lot of good resources. So yeah, use ChatGPT and ask it to break down specific problems line by line and explain why this works. Because it should be able to do that. I haven't tried it, but I'd be curious to know if it could. Like, hey, why or hey, what is the time space complexity of this problem? How can you optimize it? Why is it? Why is this better? Why is this problem not better? And then kind of reiterate, and just keep practicing as much as you can. So, cracking the coding interview, YouTube, your community if you can find it, and ChatGPT. So those four resources, those would be some pretty good starts.
okay. Well, I think we're almost at time, and I want to really be respectful of your time and everyone else's.
All
But
good.
that's been really a good chat. Thanks you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right.